Welcome to the Pro Farmer Podcast, your source for what's impacting prices today and your guide to what will impact markets in the weeks ahead. More substance, less fuss. The Pro Farmer Podcast starts now.
Welcome to the Pro Farmer Podcast, everyone. Davis Michelson here with you Monday morning, December 22nd, the first official day of calendar winter by my watch anyway. With me now, Spencer Langford joins. Spencer, let's talk about last week. Let's begin there, as always. Kind of a good news, bad news sort of a thing. If we look at the weekly closes, we had corn just a couple of cents higher. Soybeans, I'm going to call moderately lower. I don't know if we need to call it worse than moderately lower. And then wheat, just sort of couple cents lower on the week. I don't know if you want to start with the good news or the bad news or where you want to go here, Spencer, but good morning. And let's hear what you got. Where you want to start?
Yeah, good morning, Davis. I'll start with the good news, I guess. It may as well. And, I wonder how good of a news it really is. This price action that we saw in corn, we were up a few cents for the week, but really it was more kind of choppy if you look at the daily chart. We're still kind of trading sideways in this range-bound area there. And in this environment, where especially last week, where you saw pretty bearish mindset across the grains complex, we're willing to take that. I think the main things that people are going to be looking forward to kind of break us out of this range is obviously any kind of weather story we get coming out of South America. There's some minor concerns popping up with production around the safrinha crop due to a late planted soybeans in certain areas. So that'll be interesting to see. And then obviously the January WASDE report that we get next month is going to be important as well.
How important is that January WASDE report as far as what's happening in the present day? Is the market just sort of holding its breath, waiting? I feel like there are expectations out there that USDA is going to have to do something with the yield on corn in that January report. And is it possible we're stuck in this range-bound sort of price action as the market waits to get that sorted out?
Yeah, that's how I'm leaning towards. Demand on corn, where it's been really, really strong, but we haven't really seen any crazy, exciting news that's out of the norm from that, just steady, strong demand.
Well, and here's the problem with that is it's probably pretty easy for a producer sitting on a whole bucket load of corn to get a little antsy here because I'm not seeing any selling opportunities, not presently, and really nothing to hold on to in the near future beyond that January report and the expectations of maybe they oughta ... You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, and even if we do get a yield cut, we have plenty of data to show strong exports, strong ethanol use, but the feed and residual, that category, it can be a pretty big question mark from time to time, and we'll see what USDA does with that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, on Friday last week, March corn futures ended the day on Friday 3/4 of a cent lower, 443 and 3/4. May corn was down 3/4 to 451 and a half. July corn futures closed at 457 and a half. And all told, that puts us down roughly 3 cents on the week for most contracts there. Let's move over to the soybeans. Spencer, Jan beans on Friday, 3 cents lower, 10.49 and a quarter. March beans down 2.5, 10.59 and a half. July beans closed at 10.82 on Friday. That's down 3 cents. That doesn't sound too terrible, but when you add it all together, man, it felt like a really rough week for the soybean market, down almost 30 cents in these contracts.
Yeah, and all that you also add on, we hit a 7-week low in the price, and we also closed below that 1050 mark. That is a really big psychological level that it isn't necessarily great, especially when we are getting, it seems like almost every day now we're seeing reports of a flash sale to China, and the market's just not necessarily moving how we might expect off of news like that. One potentially good technical indicator that I see in the soybean market is there were a couple days last week, if you look at January and March contracts, where we did go into technically oversold territory. So we might be able to expect some sort of bounce just off of that indicator.
All right, very good. Um, I think we can leave that there. I mean, no threat in South America, really no concerns anywhere as far as soybeans go, right?
Yeah, there's some talk of some dryness earlier in the season, but it seems like rains are expected to come back in over the next week or two and look for pretty favorable crop development conditions. So even if you did see a moderate decline, the crop is just really big coming out of South America.
All right, now let's hit the wheat market here. The HRW 1 3/4 lower on Friday, 5.15 1/4. March soft red up 2 cents, 5.09 3/4. Spring wheat on Friday, the March contract up a nickel to 5.78 there. I mean, still plenty of wheat in the world, still a non-threatening sort of outlook for global wheat and for U.S. wheat. Is that fair to say, Spencer?
Yeah, definitely. What wheat, Chicago wheat in particular, it got a little close to that $5 mark, a little too close for comfort, that's for sure. Um, However, I do think we're seeing some really, really warm weather come across the plains here this coming week, and that might be some sort of weather story that we get at least locally for the U.S. crop. But you are right. There's so many different areas of the world where they're dealing with a surplus of wheat. So even if we have the Black Sea region, we always talk about how politically unstable it is right now with the conflict going on. Even if we are to deal with a slowdown to wheat coming out of that region, you can go to where, take your pick wherever else in the world and start sourcing wheat from there. Argentina, Australia, France, all these places saw really strong wheat crops this year.
All right. Well, let's move over to the livestock there where cattle just keeps on cattle. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at the cattle on feed numbers. Um, Expectations going into that report were for some pretty substantial
Mhm.
declines. We're better than 10% below year ago on both placements and marketings, as I recall. Now, ahead of that, February live cattle closed on Friday up $2.40 at 230.80. January feeders up more than $5, up 532 and a half to 345.60. And then we get the news from that cattle on feed report there. 11% declines. Have I got that right in placements and in marketings there, Spencer?
I believe so. We came in at 11.72 million head, which is slightly below analyst estimates on total inventory. Uh, I kinda think that report is fairly price friendly. I don't think we're necessarily gonna see the cattle market, skyrocket off of that. They were already in a bit of a daily uptrend, on the price. Sorry, a little bit of a price uptrend on the daily chart. So I think it's supportive news, but I don't necessarily think this is gonna cause some major breakout.
Okay. To the good, I mean, choice graded box beef prices were up 361 Friday morning. The wholesalers seem comfortable at these price levels.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to a slightly different aspect of talking about the cattle markets, and that's beef. We also saw a consumer price index report get released last week, and compared to last year at this time, beef prices were up like 14.8%, and that led pretty much all meats in that are tracked by the BLS. So we are kind of starting to get into territory, I think, of what are producers willing to, or what are consumers willing to pay for ground beef?
Well, and on the hogs, we're at 7.11 here. It seems like Feb lean hog futures rose 37.5 cents on Friday to 84.50. But when we're talking about a 7 week low in the soybeans, here we are at a 7 week high for the week on the hog futures, down 2.5 cents all told on the week, but still a pretty strong performance. Is a seasonal strength? Can we hang on to the hogs?
I think we're going to start to see a little bit of weakening as we start to move past Christmas here. Holiday hams, that demand is likely to start to subside here. However, we are also getting an update to hog inventories tomorrow from USDA. So analysts are expecting inventories to come in slightly lower than they have been. And that might be one element where we can kind of capitalize and continue the strength that we've seen in hogs through early to mid December.
All right, Spencer, I think we can probably make short work of what you expect this coming week. A 3-day work week. Christmas comes up on Thursday. Uh, any expectations for any big moves coming up this week?
Uh, I think we'll see pretty low volume holiday trade.
Yeah.
That's typically the norm for this time of year. However, with livestock, like I mentioned, we're getting an update to the hog inventories and also cold storage. So, if I'm correct, that's our first report of cold storage we've got since the government shutdown, and it'll be interesting to see. Like you mentioned with wholesale, what are beef supplies looking like? What are pork supplies? Different things like that.
Excellent. Well, Spencer Langford, happy, merry, blessed Christmas to you, brother. It's great talking with you this morning. Thanks for updating us here on the Pro Farmer Podcast.
All right, you too, Davis.
Okay, that was Spencer Langford from Pro Farmer. We're going to discuss with Bill Watts Pro Farmer's Event of the Year, Story of the Year, and Person of the Year. Come right back to the Pro Farmer Podcast.
Hey everyone, Davis Michelson here, and if you're one of the listeners without access to Pro Farmer's daily market reports and policy insights, this message is for you. Right now, you can start a free trial to Pro Farmer, unlocking the same profit-boosting information that farmers have trusted for over 50 years. Sign up online at tryprofarmer.com. No credit card needed. Visit tryprofarmer.com to sign up and get more details and updates on the topics we're discussing today, plus much, much more.
Get the latest markets, weather, and rural news whenever it works for you. Farm Journal TV is on Roku, Fire TV, and mobile. Try it for free for 14 days and take ag with you everywhere.
Well, sure glad to have you back here on the Pro Farmer Podcast. Davis Michelson with you. I've got Bill Watts, editor of Pro Farmer. And Bill, this is a big issue for us that we just released last week. Pro Farmer every year picks out an event of the year, a person of the year, and a story of the year. Before we get to what those items are specifically, it was quite the discussion we had last week. Everybody got together. We all kind of had ideas, and they really coalesced into something that I think is extremely valuable here and insightful and really does paint a great picture of some of the most significant events and people in 2025. What are your thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, it was a terrific process and my first time through this, but yeah, we had a really great discussion with yourself and everyone else on the Pro Farmer staff and Chip Flory, the editor emeritus, and also popping in and also providing a lot of good input here. So I think we were able to kind of coalesce around some stories here that all kind of represent a theme. There's a really strong through line, through the selections of the event of the year. Story of the year and person of the year in 2025.
Well, and like I said, the process is, I'll just break the fourth wall here. The process is, an email went out earlier this month and said, hey, we need some suggestions. What are everyone's thoughts? What are everyone's picks for these different categories here? And they kind of came from a lot of different places. I know, reading over that list as I saw it build and grow, man, there were so many things that could have been pinpointed as a singular event or a singular story in particular, Bill. And you're exactly right. We wound up coalescing that together, I think, in a really good way. That all goes back to that theme you talked about. Tell me about that theme just a little bit, please.
Yeah, well, clearly trade was front and center for markets and for farmers and for everyone this year. And that really, kind of dictated in the end, all our selections. And it was kind of hard to pick any story out there that didn't touch on trade in one way or another. So, I think that's how we brought it back, to the picks that we did make, right? Mm-hmm. So, we want to just get into what those picks were.
Yeah.
Obviously start with the event of the year, and we settled there on the Liberation Day announcement in April from President Trump, which really just created a firestorm of market volatility, a global market volatility, and it also then had really set the stage and put the trade story in the spotlight and for agricultural markets. But I think it was a huge story, for the mainstream media and everyone else. So that really was the sort of the catalyst, I think, for the trade story this year. As far as the story of the year, it then does follow off from that, and it was everything from all the what we call like soybean diplomacy, the battle with China, but really looking at how trade affected every aspect of the market. You look at the closing of the border for the New World, due to the New World School. Well, that's a trade story, maybe not directly related to the Liberation Day tariffs, but certainly has a trade element to it. And then you had the backlash, or the reaction to the tariffs and the concerns about affordability, which then leads to the lifting of tariffs on Brazil and the beef imports and the increase in imports from Argentina. All these things, the action reaction, all kind of reverberated around and definitely just dominated ag headlines.
Well, and those headlines will keep coming in 2026, because I think part of what makes the trade situation such a vital story to continue to follow is it's ongoing here. There really hasn't been much resolution. The border is still closed to feeder cattle from Mexico. Yes, China is buying, but it doesn't seem like the market is really, I don't know if the market isn't believing that China is going to live up to its commitments. It just seems there's so much still unresolved here, Bill.
Well, you look at the China story. We still don't have a signed trade agreement there, so I think there's still some uncertainty about exactly, what has happened. We don't have resolution, around many of these trade issues. We don't have that much in the way of signed trade deals. We still are awaiting a Supreme Court decision on whether many of these tariffs are even constitutional. And, that could open up a whole new can of worms, when we get that decision and we see how that plays out. So, there's still just a lot of uncertainty in the market around trade. And, that's going to remain an issue well into 2026.
Markets don't care for uncertainty, do they, Bill?
Well, it's a bit of a cliche, but sometimes there's more uncertainty than others. And, I think that was sort of the theme in 2025 was trade really, created a level of uncertainty around demand and around trade that was hard to ignore.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Pro Farmer's Person of the Year, the American Soybean Association President Caleb Ragland, in the midst of the soybean trade in particular and the tariffs at large, emerged as a really great voice in Washington and across the nation for agriculture here. Talk to us about our pick for the Pro Farmer Person of the Year.
Yeah, we had a debate around who exactly would be, the best representation there, and a lot of the usual sort of suspects, those names came up, but in the end, I think we felt that there was an argument made that the American farmer is obviously really had to be resilient and tough here in 2025 and really stood up to meet the challenge, and there was a sense that Ragland was a good representative of what the farmer went through, and served as an advocate, as president of the American Soybean Association and as a as a farmer. And the thing that I think impressed us overall, was just that he was a steady voice, and he stuck to the facts. Right, he was he was very fact-based, very frank. In terms of representing the challenges that farmers were facing, and he was a consistent voice, and he was in the media spotlight. Right, it's one of those situations where when soybeans are on the headlines, on the nightly news or the New York Times, that may not be really a good sign for soybean farmers, and that was, I think, sort of the case this year. And but he handled that media intensity, we thought, with a lot of poise, and and also was there in front of Congress, making the case for around input costs and the trade issues and everything else, and also dealing with the administration and all that. So at the end of the day, we thought he was a solid choice for Person of the Year.
Indeed. I just want to read a quick excerpt from Pro Farmer's newsletter. We reached out to Mr. Ragland once we had chosen him as our pick, and his response, he says, quote, "Deeply honored, humbled, and surprised was Ragland's reaction to being named Pro Farmer's Person of the Year. He said a key takeaway from his time in the spotlight was the importance of farmers banding together to influence policy. Ragland said, quote, "If we're not unified, we have very little influence, but there's a lot of strength in numbers when we come together to point to common goals." That's a quote from our Person of the Year, American Soybean Association President Caleb Ragland. Bill, it's been a heck of a ride. You hopped onto the Pro Farmer wagon here about midway through the year. We're awful glad to have you in place as our editor. And you've done a great job so far, dude. From the sounds of this, there's going to be plenty to write about, plenty of people to write about, and plenty of stories to cover for Pro Farmer in 2026. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd say so. And it's been a real honor for me to be able to hop on here and work with you and all the other great staff here at Pro Farmer. And yeah, I think 2026 is going to be a very interesting year, and I think we're eager to dig into it and try to make sense of it for everyone.
Yep. Well, Bill, let me wish you a Merry Christmas and wish you the best for the upcoming new year. Thanks for being here this morning, Bill. We appreciate the heck out of you.
Likewise, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you too.
And Merry Christmas to you as well, dear viewer. Thank you for watching the Pro Farmer Podcast. We'll be back again next week with more Pro Farmer Podcast. For Bill Watts, for Spencer Langford, and production support from Zach Zingula, it's me, Davis Michelson. Thanks for watching today.
Thanks for joining us. We'll return next week with another episode of the Pro Farmer Podcast. And remember, everything talked about today is updated throughout the week on ProFarmer.com and in this Friday's Pro Farmer newsletter.